verses 1 through 7. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. "Which one of you, having 100 sheep and losing one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders and rejoices. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and neighbors, saying to them, 'Rejoice with me, for I have found my lost sheep.' Just so, I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance." A contemporary word, to learn from animal being, by John O'Donohue, an excerpt. To learn from animal being. Nearer to the earth's heart, deeper within its silence, animals know this world in a way we never will. We who are ever distanced and distracted by the parade of bright windows, thought opens. Their seamless presence is not fractured thus. Stranded between time, gone and time emerging, we manage seldom to be where we are, whereas they are always looking out from the here and now. May we learn to return and rest in the beauty of animal being. Learn to lean low, leave our locked minds, and with freed senses feel the earth breathing within us. Thus ends the readings.
I could hear you thinking as I was walking up here, that does not look like Old Stinky, at least not the way Old Stinky looked last time. Well, I'm not Old Stinky. Poor Old Stinky had to call me in as a substitute at the last minute. He neglected to tell me a couple things about all of you. I thought I was coming to speak to a group of sheep. This is what's his usual gig, right? He goes and tells his story about the time he got lost, all lonely out in the wilderness, and then everybody feels good at the end. Well, it appears to me that you are not sheep, but human beings. Although I will say that in your Christian church, you sometimes do refer to yourselves as sheep. So, well, maybe he wasn't so far off. I hear that good Christians, though, do aspire to be the way they imagine sheep to be. Calm, obedient, careful. Obedient, did I say obedient? Yes. Well, there's a problem here. Have you ever been with sheep? Well, there's one way they are not humanly obedient. It turns out that sheep are like goats. They're very close relatives in many respects. One of them being that they are known as a bit randy. Yes, and it's true. And the other thing is, we're not as stupid as we seem to you. I've been reading the literature about sheep. And I do want to assure you that we are domesticated sheep. Domesticated. And that means that we are associated with the domus, the household. So I think you are all domesticated too, no? I'll go back to that later, but domesticated sheep, yes, okay, we're a little smaller than our wild ancestors, a little more varied in our color. Some of us have smaller horns. In the wilderness, the sheep have a pretty structured way of living. The females live in one herd with all the young ones, and the males live in a bachelor herd, except for maybe 6 or 8 weeks a year, during which the males become battering rams. There's a lot of words in your language that come from talking about sheep. First they wanted us for meat, and that was about 10,000 years ago. And then about 5,000 years later, they figured out that they could choose the ones with better wool. And so that's when the shearing started. And shearing is my favorite time of year, because shearing is the time when not everybody does this, but I like to do this. I say, go ahead and shear the body, but leave a little puffiness on the top so I can stick in my flowers. Now, Stinky, I say Stinky, that's not his real name, but we won't tell you his real name in case this gets out on social media. So Stinky and I have known each other for a very long time, and we spent a lot of time in our bachelor herd. Oh, wait, I wasn't going to let you know. You see, it's not totally clear whether I'm a ram or not. And this is a common thing among sheep. Your scientists have been studying. And what they note is, at least under domestication, a relatively high percentage of males prefer males, let's just put it that way. They don't like to use human-type words, but I'm sure you know an equivalent there. I found an excellent paper, The Ram as a Model for Behavioral Neuroendocrinology, in a journal called Hormones and Behavior. You see, humans are quite concerned about this. They might not like the way that I stick flowers in my head, or for that matter, eat them. They taste good, by the way, at least to sheep. But we're domesticated. I said something about humans being domesticated, and you might say, well, who domesticated the humans? Well, could have been the plants, could have been the sheep, could have been a combination. They could have been self-domesticated. We'll never know, because it's not an experiment we can repeat. But something about humans that differentiates them from all the other mammals that we know, and especially the primates, is that they are very cooperative. They're cooperative. In fact, they're considered hypersocial. Humans need to be around other people. That's why you come here to this congregation here, right? Domestication tends to be a selection for tameness. So the sheep that they kept for the herds were the ones that behaved more tamely, and same happened among humans, I imagine. Now, I do know that you humans like sheep. I've heard a song many times on YouTube, and it starts out, all we like sheep. All we like sheep. We like sheep. Oh, wait, it continues. Oh, I missed part of the line here. It says, we have turned every one to his own way, his or her own way. Well, we do wander. There's a spectrum of wandering. And in fact, humans have been wandering since before they were humans as we know them. They evolved in Africa and wandered out and wandered all over the world. And they took us sheep with them, and there are now 1.2 billion sheep today. Now you might be asking yourselves, what does this have to do with Jesus' parable? Jesus' parable about the person who lost one sheep. Jesus probably told this story more than once. I mean, it's a short one, it's memorable. Yes, indeed. So probably told it more than once. You got to remember it's a made-up story. Parables are made-up stories. It's probably not true that someone who had 100 sheep left 99 in the wilderness and went off to chase the one that wandered off. You know, in biblical texts, that number 100 is often symbolic. It can mean a great number. And in biblical Hebrew, at least, the word for has can also mean owns. So you'll remember, how this parable starts with, there was someone who had 100 sheep. Let me get the correct words here. Which one of you, in fact, it's not someone, which one of you having 100 sheep? Jesus was talking to people who owned sheep. Yes, indeed. And losing one of them does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one that's lost until he finds it. What is this big deal about this 1%? Why does this sheep owner focus on that 1% instead of caring for that 99% in the wilderness? Now, Stinky warned me not to get political here. He said, these folks do not like to hear about politics in their sanctuary. But it seems to me that there's a little bit of this 1%ism going on in your country right now, where the needs of 99% are being desecrated. The means of meeting them are being desecrated while giving more and more to that 1%. Stinky was never one of those 1% of the sheep. He was old Stinky, right? So he reads this story a little differently than I do. But I think it is interesting to think about that 1% repenting, turning to the kinds of messages that we all were taught in Sunday school, like love your neighbor as yourself, love God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength and animal being, love your neighbor as yourself. Stinky, forgive me. Now, you're probably wondering what to call me, because I'm not Stinky. I'm often called Flory, after these flowers that I love to wear and eat. Flory. And you're probably wondering my pronouns now, too. Your choice, but they will do, because it's never wrong, right? It's always, could be one, could be the other, right? not. The thing is, why do sheep and why do humans always want to know the gender of the being that they are spending time with? What difference does it make? Well, we know it makes a difference. The scientists have told us that the sexual development, the brain development, the physical development are different in the two genders. But what they know from studying sheep is that it's not an either-or. Turns out it might be true for humans too. Well, so is this parable a cautionary tale of some sort? Can we make it modern in some way? You know, I was reading in your New York Times the other day about a new telling of one of the classics about Snow White, trying to change that story. And, well, maybe we can change this story too. One commentator said, you know, we advertisers, up until about 1995, our idea was that sex sells. So, hey, you, excuse me, there. Sex sells. But in around 1995, the advertisers learned that rage sells. Now, how do you get people to get angry? Well, maybe you threaten them with losing something they didn't even know they had. Some kind of privilege that they have. There's this thing, you know, do I want privilege for us or freedom for all? And there's this ambiguous back and forth tension. That's, you know, certainly part of what's going on with this 1% that I was talking about earlier. But what you have to remember, and sheep try to remember this all the time, is that we live in a world of abundance. There is more grass out there. You think 1.2 billion sheep is a lot, but there's more grass out there than all of us could eat. There's more sheep that we could hang out with than we could ever meet all of them. You know, back when this church started, 100 years ago now, Dr. White was the first minister. And they said about him, his coming assures an interesting hour each Sunday. And the people of the church in that time were really big on science, which is why I knew I could talk about, you know, journal articles and stuff like that here. Because you still like science, I think. Or is it sheep that you like? Well, never mind, I'll get that straight later. But Dr. White was known for his logical and sympathetic and understanding addresses. So let me try to be a little bit logical and sympathetic and understanding with you as I close. This parable about having 100 sheep and losing one, as long as we imagine ourselves as the sheep in the story, we tend to make ourselves that one who is lost and someone has to come find us. But let's imagine ourselves one of the 99 unnecessarily abandoned. But Jesus didn't say imagine yourself as a sheep. Jesus said imagine that you are the owner of 100 sheep. I present you a dilemma. I present you a dilemma. What would you do? Would you protect the 99 and hope that the one will come back, find its way? Oh dear, I'm going to go off on another tangent here, another tangent. If you watch social media about sheep very much, I don't see very much affirmation of that. Well, if you watch social media about sheep very much, you'll know that every once in a while, someone finds a sheep that's been lost for 4 or 5 or 6 years, and it is so overgrown with wool because it missed the shearing that it can hardly get around. It can hardly see because the wool falls down over the eyes. And many people go out to rescue that sheep, and they carry it in joyfully, and they shear it, and they bring it back to health. Something that I wondered when I first started following is it always the male sheep that wander like that, because they kept giving them male names. But then I started seeing some females too. And then I read something sad, that often when a sheep goes missing, it's a young one. And it's somehow this young one survives in the wilderness for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years before being found. I don't know. Which is more important? The one that was lost or the ones that are here? That's the challenge Jesus gives us today. Are we content with our herd as it is? Doesn't it seem like there's a sheep missing or 2? Where are they? How can we find them? Which wilderness do they find themselves in? Can we share our joy of cooperation, of relationship, of caring, of loving our neighbor? With one missing sheep at least? Or shall we stay here, huddled up? Our choice. Our choice. Our choice. Well, ta-ta. See you next time.